Welcome to the Real Bible Rob podcast, and I'm so delighted to have Dr. Beverly Roberts Gaventa with me today. It's such a delight. Thank you for joining me, Beverly. She is the retired distinguished professor at let's see if I have let's see, I have to stop sharing there. Sorry about that. She is the retired distinguished professor of New Testament interpretation at Baylor University, and she's also Professor Emerita at Princeton Theological Seminary. And many of my PCUSA colleagues have taken classes from Beverly, and she was recommended that I contact her, and she was so gracious about joining me here. And I'm a big fan of her books, including her accessible 2016 book, When in Romans, An Invitation to Linger with the Gospel According to Paul. And more recently, her 2024 Romans commentary from the New Testament Library. And I've been using it a lot in preaching, so I'm just really wonderful to be able to talk to Beverly about that. So welcome, Beverly. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for the invitation. I am always delighted to hear that people find my work interesting and compelling and useful, especially for pastors.
Yes, well, that's certainly been the case here.
Good.
And and Roman scholarship has changed so much in the last few decades. And I've spent a lifetime struggling with it and wrestling with it, and especially as a pastor. It's so refreshing to kind of see this new perspective and how some of the theological gloss or theological overlay that's been on Romans, we can set the book free from that a little bit. So that's really the theme of what I'd like to talk with you about, and
Sure.
understand where you're coming from with that. So, in your commentary, you wrote that writing a commentary of Paul's letter to the Romans is a bit like trying to capture the Atlantic Ocean in a liter bottle. That is so true. So instead of boiling the ocean, we'll just hit a few highlights here, but
Sure.
I really appreciate that. So, well, first of all, I just wanted to ask if there anybody who doesn't know who you are that are listening to this, if you could just give a little bit of a brief of yourself and to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Well, you've already done a little bit of that. I have sometimes joked that I've been institutionalized my whole life. I've been in academia throughout my career, teaching at several different places, but for the most part at Princeton Seminary,
Hmm.
and then later at Baylor. And I have a long history of working with pastors and trying to help prospective pastors be better readers of Scripture, which is really what we're all about, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's such a great mission. It certainly has helped a lot. So I kind of want to get into just a few highlights here to really uh, maybe get by started saying, what do you think about sort of the fresh perspective? Do you have sort of an overview statement about how Pauline studies have changed over the last couple of decades?
Well, in general, the study of the New Testament has changed immensely over the course of my career.
Hmm.
Now, it used to be the case that it was dominated entirely by a historical paradigm.
Yeah.
The question being, why was this written for whom? What
Hmm.
debate was going on? And that sort of thing. And the idea was to get back to the author's original perspective, the author's
Hmm.
original objective and plan. And it has to be said, biblical scholarship as a whole was at that point overwhelmingly dominated by men,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
especially by men coming out of a European perspective
Hmm.
uh, on scholarship. And several things have changed. One is we have many more women involved in biblical scholarship, and in a way that they weren't before. Women have always been involved
Yeah.
with studying scripture. We have many more folks of not non-white traditions,
Mm-hmm.
non-white churches, non-North American, Northern European traditions. So our questions have changed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But now the question you asked really went to about Romans in particular.
Yeah.
And I think what you're seeing and what you've experienced is a move from a strictly um, systematic theological reading of the
Yes.
letter into one that is a little more interested, a lot more interested in the people to whom Paul wrote,
Mm-hmm.
the way the letter was conveyed, the constituencies at Rome, and some of the concerns between Paul and these groups.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say, and I want to be clear about this, it's not to say that the letter isn't theological.
Yeah.
It's very theological, but that theology grows out of lived experience. It's not
Mm-hmm.
a kind of abstract primer, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not, and it seems that the different interpretations between, say, Catholic theologians and Protestant theologians, Calvinists, non-Calvinists, kind of highlights that we put our theology on Paul as much as we get from Paul. Um,
Yeah,
that's
well, I
sort of,
think
yeah,
that's always true with texts, you know.
yeah.
That's true when you read the daily newspaper, if you do, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's very much the case with all that we do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, now was that your goal in writing when in Romans was to, but maybe I should just ask, what was your goal when in writing when in Romans?
Well, interestingly, that book came out of some lectures I had done, mostly at Austin Seminary, but
Hmm.
at other places as well. And then when I cast it as a book and cast it as an invitation, I really did want to give people a sense of what I would call the size of the letter.
Hmm.
Now, on the one hand, yes, it's written for very specific groups of people, and we can talk some about how I
Hmm.
think that came to be. But it's also about not just the way I was brought up, not just my relationship to God or
Hmm.
yours, or even that of Jews in general and Gentiles in general. It's about God's work for the whole of creation.
Hmm.
So the canvas on which this letter is depicted needs to be much larger than the way we
Yeah.
often thought about it.
Yeah, there is a largeness to it, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, kind of diving in on a couple of points that I thought might highlight your point. The of course, the attention to Romans 18 through 32, Paul's famous diatribe, um, and the sudden jarring change from third person
Mhm.
to second person plural in 2:1. And I've preached on this a little bit too. It's just you can't read chapter 1 without reading chapter 2 as well, right?
Right,
And
exactly.
and that jarring change seems to be a setup in my mind, and that keeps coming back in subsequent chapters in the
Exactly.
letter.
Yeah.
So is that so? I was reading about how in you said Romans 11 or 9 and 11 that you really can't ignore those chapters as they often are glossed over because it's kind of like revisiting. Is that it seems to be another reversal where there's this quick reversal. Um, I was wondering if, maybe putting a finger on the arrogance of the Gentiles. Is that is does that help us as far as like cherry picking the scripture for?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one thing to say, and we sort of back up a step and to say, we have to remember that this is a letter that was written to be heard,
Mm, yeah.
right? For the most part, uh, many people, not just in that generation, but in later generations, heard this letter.
Yeah.
So not unlike when you preach a sermon, there's something that's going to happen along the way. It's not an essay where there are 3 points.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
um, I started to say 3 points in a poem, but we still, there's nothing wrong with poems, nor is there anything wrong with having points. But I think what Paul is doing is leading people into a kind of experience,
Oh, okay.
and
Yeah.
that an experience of, uh, in a way, an experience of judgment at 2:1.
Hmm.
It is entirely possible for some of his audience in Rome to hear that section and do what a lot of people do today,
Hmm.
second part of chapter 1, and think, yeah, those are bad people.
Yeah. Yeah. Like crossing their arms
Those,
and going, "You're
those are
darn right."
really bad people, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of like, tirades about welfare queens and
Yes.
blah, 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 how those bad people do this and that and the other. But then Paul turns it around. I think he actually is working them up for
Yeah.
this.
Right.
And
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
turns around and says, and you too,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You too. You are the same. When you judge others, you are making the very same mistakes. And he does that elsewhere in the letter. One of my favorite places is in the middle of chapter 3,
Uh-huh.
where he has this long quotation from scripture that's an odd it's a set of quotations.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
He weaves, I think he weaves together, and it's all about there's no one who does
Yes.
law, there's no one who fears God, there's no one who does what is right. And if you're familiar with the Psalms
Uh-huh.
or wisdom literature, then you know that what he's going to do is say, but the righteous people,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
they're the ones who do what is right, right? But he doesn't do that. Instead, he says there's no one who is right.
Yeah.
And so he drives them into this sense of the need of God to act in
Yeah.
Jesus, right? But the other one you were talking about is in chapter 9 through 11.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of things working there. There are a lot of things going on
Yeah,
there.
of course. Yeah.
But one of them is in chapter 10. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. Mm.
No problem.
In chapter 10, he sets up this account of Israel, and he talks
Hmm.
about all of Israel as if it were one thing, and they have all been tripped, right?
Yeah.
God put a stumbling block in place, and they tripped, and they didn't get to righteousness. And then you get to 11:1,
Yeah.
and
Right.
he says what he seems to have been getting at all along.
Uh-huh.
It's real, God has rejected God's people. Well, but then what he says is, but God hasn't done that, has he?
Right.
Of course not, right?
Another one
God
of his
would
certainly
never,
nots. Yeah.
right, God would never reject Israel.
Yeah.
So there's several times when he does this, and I just think it's very compelling
Hmm.
to see the way the letter often turns around and causes us to rethink what we imagined he was saying, which is what you were getting at when we cherry pick,
Yes.
then we may be misunderstanding what he's doing at any given place.
Yeah, I was in studying chapter 3. I was reading something from Amy Jill Levine, where she talks about how Paul certainly knew that when he was picking out the bad things, that there was another side to the argument. And she was saying, well, so we're seeing one side of this argument about the depravity of humanity, and that maybe just picking that out by itself is only looking at one side of Paul's, uh, when he's talking to the interlocutor, right? And
Right,
back and forth and
right,
back and
right.
forth. And it seems that from a theological point of view, we over the centuries, we've just picked one side of the argument. Is there is that a valid way of looking
Well,
at it, or?
maybe, but by the time you get to chapter 5, you
Hmm.
know, when he talks about Adam,
Yeah.
it's not, he is not saying there actually are good people, you know.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
he is saying is in Adam, I mean, I think he has an argument there that is a very negative argument about the human being and
Hmm.
the need of God to rescue all
Yeah.
of human beings. Now, I differ from some of my colleagues on that, but I think he means Jews as well as Gentiles.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that we're in together
Yeah,
from a
yeah.
different point of view, right? So,
Ex-
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. This is not, I mean, I think the important thing to say there where I think Amy Jill and I would agree is this is not an argument about how Jews have done particularly bad things. You
Hmm.
know, this is not an anti-Jewish argument at all. It is, in a sense, an argument, an analysis of the whole of the human race.
Hmm. Yes. Cool. Uh, one of the things that I found very helpful to me in your commentary was the discussion about the Hilasterion
Mhm.
in Romans
Mhm.
3:25. Of course, in combination with Romans, what, 3, 9, or like 10 through 18 and so forth. It kind of
Mhm.
builds up a lot of the Calvinist theology, right?
Right,
And
right.
so the understanding the nuance of Christ being put forward as the cover of the Ark of the Covenant versus the what I would classify as a very theological term, the propitiation,
Mhm.
or I don't know exactly how to propitiation.
I
Um,
I think either is fine.
Either fine. um, and how that's used in translation, because clearly traditionally that more theological word the propitiation has been used rather than as the place of atonement or the covering of that. um I was wondering, in your discussion you kind of give you describe both sides of that argument, but I think you say something along the line of being we should favor the more literal translation, the as the
Absolutely.
cover. Yeah, can you explain that a little bit? And
Yeah. Well, there have been several objections to that, the notion that it's what people used to call the mercy seat.
hmm.
But what they really mean in the description of the Ark of the Covenant is that this is the cover of it.
Hmm.
And it would be the holiest place there was.
Hmm.
Right. That's my point. Now, to go back, one of the reasons people say, well, it can't mean that is they say, because that means Jesus is a thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, the Gospel of John would be really surprised by this because what do you get there? I am the vine, and
Yeah,
you are,
right. Yes. The
Jesus is a
metaphors are
thing.
all over the place. Yeah.
Right. It's a metaphor. And I don't take it as either propitiation or expiation, but as this reference to the holy. God is putting forward, God is the one who is doing this. It's not the priests making the sacrifice, it's
Hmm.
God making and it elevates Jesus to being really the center of God's dwelling.
Hmm.
And there's another, I mean, there's another line in there where he talks about we have all have, well, the way I translate it is all
Hmm.
have sinned and been removed from the glory of God. Well, in the Hebrew Bible, the glory of God is God's very presence.
Hmm.
So God is acting here to to restore that relationship. But
Hmm.
now Paul uses several other images here too. It's not just that. He also uses a
Hmm.
forensic language here. God makes things right again. He uses language of liberation.
Hmm.
God acts to redeem. So he's using all of this rich language to build up, I think, this understanding
Hmm.
of what it is that Jesus' death means, which to me is far more than simply sacrificial language.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had a Jewish member of my congregation actually tell me what it means to celebrate Yom Kippur, and saying that it's viewed as this, um, well, I don't know how to say it, but maybe in a way that enriches our understanding of how the Hilasterion is used, and that is used, and saying that, yeah, I mean, it's the cleansing for a year, and
Yeah,
we it's kind of a done thing. God did this for us, and we celebrate how God has done this for us. And every once a year, we're reminded, we do the covering, and I just thought that was so helpful rather than it being like a scorecard that has to
yeah,
be, yeah.
right, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a relationship of Yom Kippur that I think that we should understand better from this point of
Well,
view?
a number of people have made that interpretation of this text, and I don't object to it. I just
Hmm.
don't think that exhausts what's going on here.
Okay.
I think that, that by Paul's day, you know, this becomes a reference to holiness itself and not
Hmm.
just sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
which I mean, Christians have very quickly gotten into this sacrificial language, and then we get in trouble with it, right?
Mm, yeah.
And so it becomes a fairly moralistic thing.
Hmm.
I think this is a very liturgical image.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. That it's a representation of the gift of Jesus as the,
God's own presence with us.
yeah, as the presence. Yeah. Wonderful. Um, Now, of course, like I think a lot of people, and I love to preach on Romans 8. It comes up three times in our lectionary, and it feels like a relief when you get to Romans 8, especially as I've been preaching through it. And we used a N.T. Wright's Bible study thing a couple years ago, and he had talked about the essential chapter, and he goes, "I don't like this. I don't want you to box me in," but he always talks about it being the essential chapter for him. It seems kind of like maybe a little bit of a theological statement to me, um, but it seems too early to say that the highlight of Romans is in chapter 8.
Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts about that? Do you agree about the essential nature of chapter 8, or how do you see it
Yeah. Well,
fitting into
I
the?
don't think there are any chapters that are inessential or non-essential, and I'm
Yeah.
sure Tom would agree. I understand what he's saying. It's a kind of hinge chapter,
Mm,
right? Where this, this, these threads having to do with sin and death and the law
mm-hmm,
have come together, and Paul has several times talked about sin and death back in
mm-hmm.
chapter 1 and 2, in 3, in 5, 6, 7,
Yeah.
and 8. What he says is that Christ has Christ that sin has been it's that Christ has put to death sin,
Hmm.
essentially,
Yeah.
right? And so he moves then to what a lot of people say about chapter 5. He moves then into this discussion of what we would call the Christian life.
Hmm.
Right? You get the language of spirit, what it means to live in the spirit,
Hmm.
right? What it means to have the spirit live in us. But there's the second half of the chapter becomes very much more, I think, anticipatory, right?
Mm, yeah.
It recognizes whatever they are, the sufferings of this age,
Yeah.
right? And it widens the lens even further. This is not about just humans, but
Hmm.
also about the whole of creation
Mm,
that
yeah.
longs to be redeemed, right?
Hmm.
So Paul looks at that, but then he looks to the present and talks in 31 to 39
Hmm.
which is many people's favorite passage, and
Yeah.
not mine, about how I take it to be trash talk. Uh, God will not be defeated
Yeah.
by all of these things, right? Um, but the interesting thing is, if you read from the end of chapter 8 to the beginning of chapter 9,
Hmm.
find yourself, and you take out that white space that the editors always put in,
Yeah.
what you get is, there nothing can separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ. But what does that mean about Israel? Right?
Oh, yes. Right.
So I think there's an anticipation in chapter 8 about the final triumph of God.
Hmm.
The sufferings of this age are not, of the present time, are not comparable, not
Yeah.
capable of being compared with what lies ahead for us. But what does that say about Israel?
Hmm.
So that it is impossible for Paul to anticipate the final triumph of God without Israel.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because,
so I
yeah. Yeah.
so I think 8 is absolutely essential, but so are 9 through 11.
I guess if you arrive at the end of 8, you kind of could say that Paul's harder on Jewish people than he is on the Gentiles. And that if you just ended right there, then you would think maybe what you're alluding to is that Israel's doomed, right? Or there's a sense of that and that maybe if you end at 8, you're being premature because the other side of the argument hasn't been told. Is
Yeah,
that?
but I think there's a real issue for him. It's not just the other side hasn't been told, but for Paul, God's faithfulness to Israel requires that in God's creation of Israel,
Mm-hmm.
right, requires God's redemption of Israel.
Yeah.
And so we get all hung up by reading 9 through 11 as if it were about whether Israel is faithful to God.
Mm-hmm.
I think the real question is, or the thing he's struggling to articulate, is God is faithful to Israel,
Ah, interesting.
period.
Yeah. Yeah. Not giving up. I mean, the end of 8 is not giving up on humanity,
Right,
right? And under any circumstances, well, he's not giving up then on Israel either.
right, right.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. I kind of skipped toward the end here in chapter 14. I've always found that a very interesting, maybe another relief chapter, right? A lot of heavy stuff, and then you get to this gracefulness in there. And you said, you for your headings, you said differences over dinner. And then you followed that up with the danger of being right. And I was so intrigued by that because um, I, it seems to me that 14 is a little bit of a punchline. Maybe uh, the final argument, especially after 12 and 13, that, well, we're going to be different and we have to tolerate each other. Is that the way I should, we should look at 14
I
or,
think it's more than tolerate.
okay.
What does he say? He says, welcome one another,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I actually think there's a lot in 12 and 13 that lead up to chapter 14.
Mm-hmm.
You Owe no one anything except to
Mm-hmm.
love one another. Pursue good for all insofar as it's possible for you. I think there are a number of things that indicate that in 14 we're dealing with a real problem
Yeah. Yeah.
where there are groups, probably some of them are Jewish and others are Gentile,
Mm-hmm.
who are quarreling when they come together for a larger meal,
Mm-hmm.
because some of them observe kosher law and believe that they must continue to do that, and
Mm-hmm.
others think they're free. And
Yeah.
Paul agrees with the latter group.
Uh,
But not to the detriment of the former. Right.
Mm.
That's why I use this, the danger of being right. I actually got this from Karl Barth.
Oh. Hmm.
Um, his commentary on Romans often I find most helpful when it's furthest from the text.
Okay.
He will go off on these tirades, and you think, what is he talking about? And then when you sit with the text for a while, you realize, oh, I get it. I get what you're doing. And he says that chapter 14 is for those who have read the whole of the letter up to this point and understand it and agree.
Yeah. That's awesome because that's the way I've seen it as well. It's kind of this punchline, it's the
Yeah, yeah,
in a
it's
way that
yeah. I mean, and when I said the danger of being right, you and I both know many people who are right in the worst possible way, right?
yes.
And for Paul, the question of what for the first century, not just for Paul, the question of what you eat is not a matter of dietary preference,
Yeah.
right? It's a matter of identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're eating pork, which was very popular in Rome,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
widely available, if you're eating pork and you're bringing pork to the church night supper
Yeah.
and other people are harmed by it, you are doing harm.
Yeah. To them. Yeah. To the community. To them in the community. Yeah.
Community.
So do we see? Are we hearing echoes of Galatians in this? This idea of two communities just having trouble trouble getting along, and
I think it's a little bit closer to First Corinthians on this point,
okay.
to the quarrels there about the Lord's Supper.
Okay. Yeah, in chapter 11 of
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay,
And
interesting.
earlier about eating food that's been offered to idols,
Hmm.
remember? In 8:3.
Yes, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I've always found that interesting also about allegiances. The the reason why I mentioned Galatians is this idea of being in right with the Romans, right? The hierarchy
Right.
uh, and so you separate? Are you part of the Jewish diaspora that has some status, a different status than Gentiles who've become
Uh-huh.
Christians? And um, okay, so then the one thing I really wanted to get at too was just how you say frequently you say as Phoebe read to them, and that sounds like what you were talking about, that the book was meant to be heard,
Right.
and that but Phoebe was saying that. Um, and then you also said in your book, you said that baby girls are probably not going to be named Tryphania or Tryphosa, but should be named Unia, right? And
Right.
I was
Right.
just wondering,
Right.
yeah, your perspective on that. That how well, I guess I could. My tirade is, how can you read chapter 16 of Romans and think that women don't have a place in the early church? Um,
Yeah. That you have to work really hard at that. As you know, people start, what people see depends on where they begin.
mhm.
And people who begin with First Timothy,
Hmm.
or people who begin with the assumption that they already know what Paul says,
Hmm.
uh, don't pay a lot of attention to Romans 16.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I always found helpful in teaching was to begin teaching Romans with chapter 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
First of all, it helps people to get a sense that this is a real letter,
Hmm.
right? It also gives them a sense when you see these greetings to different groups that there are probably different groups of Christians. This is not like the first Presbyterian church of First City, right?
Right.
This is a groups of people. They may be different from one another. But then you also see a number of names of women,
Hmm.
and they are given titles that suggest leadership. Now,
Hmm.
I'd be the first to say that we don't know what Paul meant by diakonos.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what he meant by apostolos.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't begin by saying, well, he couldn't have meant X because
Yeah.
this is a woman, right? You
Yeah.
just, if Paul he calls Jesus a diakonos
Yeah.
back in chapter 15, you can't say a diakonos is one thing if it's a male and another
Right.
if
And
it's a female,
yes.
unless you have some grounds in the text for doing that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And and there's so much information in those first two verses there about if she's a benefactor, she had to have been wealthy and she had to have been literate. She had to have had means.
Yeah.
And all of and so obviously, and to be able to be entrusted with this most important letter to Rome.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's I don't want to overstate the wealth thing because I think sometimes people suddenly imagine her among the elite.
mm,
I think she probably, I think anybody who had enough resources not to be living hand to mouth
mm-hmm,
was somebody who could be a benefactor,
mm,
right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
She clearly had some resources. We don't need to overstate that.
Yeah,
Uh, but he identifies her as a deacon of the Church of Kencrea, which
yeah,
is not his church,
yeah,
so far as we know. So she has a status, if you want to call it status, she has a role that is independent of him.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But also, I believe she must have been with him, with a group in Corinth, as the letter was discussed. Paul was not going to send this letter with somebody he didn't know, somebody he didn't trust.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So whether she read it or not, and I've never lost sleep about that.
yeah,
But she read it. I think she read it. I don't know who else it would be. She's our best guess. If
yeah,
she read the letter, then she is its interpreter.
yes, yes.
Even if
Which
she,
must have been true for all of the people that carried these letters, right?
right,
Yeah.
if she didn't read the letter, then she's nonetheless the person who is Paul's representative and
Mm-hmm.
who I think goes to these various groups and helps them to understand what he's saying.
Yeah.
She's the living voice. So she becomes then really the first interpreter of this letter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we only have those two verses about her,
Right.
but it's more than a lot of people of her.
That is correct.
And I often, I guess the other thing that comes out of, I think you mentioned it as well in chapter 16, you just get this overwhelming sense of gratitude that he's grateful for these people to be his supporters. So he's
Right.
that gets that counters the lone wolf Paul that I think a lot of
Right.
people think
And
of,
I
right?
wouldn't even say they're his supporters so much as these are people who have their own work.
Hmm.
So it's not that Paul is himself the center of everything.
Hmm.
He is grateful for what they do.
Yeah, yeah. That the comrades.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I was thinking, of course, Unia is fun to talk about too in terms of the Greek, and I, I've always found it fascinating how translations will add words in to say things like, uh, in the eyes of the apostles or in the vision, and there's nothing in the Greek that says eyes or vision or anything, and it's
Yeah.
just they worked really hard to.
Yeah. There's a big dispute about that, and I don't think grammar will settle it. But this is not an original point with me. Someone else made the point that Paul nowhere else ranks a person by what other people thought.
Yes, yeah,
And to me, that makes it really hard to say anything other than she is an apostle,
yeah,
which is the way she was understood for at least a millennium in the church's
Hmm.
life.
Yes, yeah. And
Now, you can
she's
then say, what does an apostle do? Right?
right.
She's not one of the 12. Well, that's right. Neither is Paul.
Yeah. She's not, yeah. And she's not a kinsman. I'm quite sure of that. So,
Right, right, right,
but but yeah, part of his family, I guess, extended family in a way. And that, why would he, like you said, why would he care what any other apostle or would think
exactly.
of
Yeah.
her? Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very compelling, actually. And these terms are loose terms, but I think we've tightened them and made them into
Right,
qualifications, right,
right.
or credentials. I guess to close here uh, is there anything else that by just touching on these major shifts in the letter? Which I think are very apparent, right? Whenever he says "Megan oito," right, and it just like shifts. Is there anything else that kind of highlights what you're talking about here in terms of giving us a different perspective that the um, I don't know how to say this, but just to that highlights the change of the over the last couple of decades with this.
Well, um, I don't think of anything in particular. I mean, there are always these ongoing disputes
Hmm.
about where Paul gets ideas, and is he more influenced by Jewish traditions, by Jewish texts, by
Hmm.
Greco-Roman
Right.
philosophical categories? Um, I think for myself, having worked with it for a very long time, one of the things I want people to notice is how much what Paul has to say here is about what God is doing
Hmm.
and about what God is doing now. The now time is a phrase he uses at several points, and his preoccupation is really with what God is doing and very little with what humans have to do in response to make everything okay.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. There's not really a lot of eschatology in the book as much, and that it's really about how we perceive right now, how we get people to work together, be on the same or push the mission in the same direction and so forth. I
Yeah, there's
that's a sense
also
I get. Yeah.
yeah, there's also, I think, and one of the things that I try to bring out in the commentary, I don't know whether it's successful or not, is there's a great deal of doxology in this letter.
Mm. Hmm.
Is maybe what you were getting at earlier. But there's, yes, he's grateful for these fellow workers, but there's a great deal of doxology. I mean, what is the problem with the human in 118 to
Hmm.
follow? We're used to saying, well, somebody might be having sex with the wrong partner. That is not what he
Yeah.
says. What he says is they didn't worship and serve God as God.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the human problem as far as Paul is
Right.
concerned. And it cuts across Jew Gentile lines. They did not worship God as God. And what he gets to is this, finally in chapter 8, well, not finally, but in chapter 8
Hmm.
is this the spirit that enables us to spirit of adoption that enables us to cry out, Abba, Father.
Hmm.
It's this recognition of God.
Right.
And then in chapter 15, the first half of chapter 15 is preoccupied with this. I think it's eschatological imagination of Jew and Gentile together,
Mm-hmm.
glorifying God. Right?
Hmm.
There's all of this language of giving praise to God that we somehow don't notice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, and I think that uh, when Paul when he tirades, he's sort of puncturing, it feels like to me, especially in chapter one, he's puncturing the arrogance or of the of the of the man who thinks that he's got it all under control himself, or he has complete
Yeah,
self-control. He's the ultimate man because he has self-regulation and control. And he says, "No, God's given you over to your passions already." So,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. And then he comes back in and says, I don't have control over myself. You know, I do things that I can't do, or do the thing I hate." So I find that very interesting as well, that God is the uh, the one to be honored, and it's not human self regulation or self control,
Self-glorification. Yeah.
self glorification. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much. I think this is wonderful, and I'm so appreciative of your time, and
You were most welcome.
that really helps me a lot. Just like
Good.
your work has helped me a lot, and just kind of putting it together. I find that my tirades against the book and sometimes against the theology that people have put on the book have caused me to kind of forget parts of it, I just this continual work that needs to happen, right? To
Well, for all of
Yeah,
us. Yeah.
for all of us. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you so much, and
You're welcome,
I
Rob. It's
really
nice to
appreciate
talk with you.
it.
Best wishes.
Best wishes to you too.